Okay, so we're going to look at cell division. There's two types of cell division. There's mitosis and there's meiosis. So what is cell division? It's exactly what it sounds like. So it's when one cell divides into two brand new cells. It's very similar to binary fission, what we talked about when we talked about asexual reproduction in section 2. So you start off with one cell, and it's how we make new cells. It happens in all living things. It's happening inside of you right now. It's happening in your skin cells. It's how you replace your skin over time, or if you get a cut, it's how you're able to replace that skin that was broken so that you heal. So first we're going to look at the case of asexual reproduction in terms of cell division. So remember, asexual reproduction from section 2, you're making basically identical cells. So you're starting off with one cell, and we're going to make brand new cells that are identical to that original cell. So the cell content, so everything inside the cell, is divided equally into two new cells. So that also includes things like the cytoplasm, the mitochondria, your plasma membrane. Also, you need to have enough of that. That's the outside of the cell. But what about the DNA? So if we take the DNA that's in your original cell and we divide it into two cells, you're going to have half the number of DNA, or half the number of chromosomes in each cell. And for asexual reproduction, we want identical cells. So we don't want half the number of chromosomes. We want the full entire set. So if we were to equally divide right away, like I just said, each cell would have half the number of chromosomes, or half the DNA, as the parent cell. So what has to happen first, or to avoid this, we need to duplicate the DNA, or we need to double the amount of DNA. So for just a little bit inside of each of your cells, you're going to have twice as many chromosomes. So what is twice the number of chromosomes that a human has? So what is 2 times 46? Hopefully you're coming up with the number 92. So very briefly, in human cells, we have 92 chromosomes. And then those are going to split so that each of our new cells gets 46 chromosomes. So for a short time, the parent cell has 2 times the amount of DNA it usually has. So that word parent cell, that's referring to the original cell that we're starting with. When the cell eventually divides into 2 new cells, each cell will receive 1 complete set of DNA. So we're talking about humans. Each of our new cells will end up having 46 chromosomes. And this process is called mitosis. The point of mitosis is that it creates 2 identical daughter cells. So the original cell that you start with is called the parent cell. Your DNA inside of that cell will duplicate so that you have 2 times as much DNA in there. And it will divide into 2 brand new cells that are called daughter cells, and they are identical to that original parent cell. When we say identical, it means that all those A's, T's, C's, and G's that make up the genes, that make up your chromosomes, those are all going to be the exact same as your parent cell. And that's probably a good thing, especially if you're making things like skin cells. you don't want new genes or something popping up in there. You want them to stay exactly the same. Mitosis makes up your body or somatic cells. So think of body cells as being literally every cell in your body except for two. So it does not include eggs in females, and it also does not include sperm in males. The more technical word for a body cell is a somatic cell, but usually in grade 9 we're going to talk about body cells. So mitosis makes identical cells in all of your body somatic cells. Identical DNA. So for example, skin, hair, etc. Literally everything in your body except for eggs and sperm. All right, in your notes booklet, you have all of these empty cells and you need to fill them in. So if you need to, pause the video so that you can go grab 2 different colors of pencil crayons or markers or whatever you have. And then you're going to follow along and draw what's inside of each cell. We're going to take some notes off to the side of each cell as well. So imagine this is our body cell that we're going to start with. And those are our chromosomes. So this cell in total has 2 chromosomes. Unlike humans that have 46. But just for this example, so it's easier to draw, we're just going to start with 2 cells. This is called the parent cell. Remember, that means that it's our original cell. And its entire set of DNA is made up by 2 chromosomes. Well, I ran out of room on my slide there. So you have the one red chromosome and you have the one blue chromosome. And they're just kind of hanging out in the nucleus right now. Next, what needs to happen, because we're going to divide our cell, and we don't want to just split off into 2 cells, otherwise each cell would have 1 chromosome in it. So the first thing that needs to happen is we need to duplicate our chromosomes. Okay, so off to the side, we're going to write duplicate or duplication of DNA. And then just for reference, we're going to write down how many chromosomes we have. So now we have 2 red chromosomes and 2 blue chromosomes, total of 4 chromosomes. And this doesn't last very long. It doesn't affect you in any way. It's just so that once we divide, each daughter cell, each brand new cell, can have a full set of chromosomes, which was 2 chromosomes. So the next step that happens is all of your chromosomes line up in the center of the cell. So we'll just write line up. So what actually happens inside of your cell is you have, just on the inside of your plasma membrane, you have these little kind of like posts, I guess, and they start to send out these long chains of proteins that will eventually attach themselves onto the chromosomes so that they can pull them to either side of the cell. Okay, so our chromosomes have lined up. So each of the chromosomes, 1 red, 1 blue, gets pulled to either side, and the plasma membrane that outside of the cell will start to pinch off so that now we have two complete cells. Okay, these are called daughter cells. So we're going to say we're going to say identical, because that's really important. Two identical daughter cells. Maybe I'll write it at the top. And each cell has two chromosomes. So each cell has one red chromosome and one blue chromosome. And that's exactly what our parent cell started off with. So each chromosome has the identical set of genes. And remember, genes have different forms of allele. So if your parent cell had an allele for, let's say, black hair, both of these cells will also have an allele for black hair. They're identical. These are exact clones of that original cell that we started with. Again, this is just for body cells. Every cell in your body except for eggs and sperm. It's a good thing that they're identical, because you want everything in parts of your body, like your hair or all the cells in your eyeballs or all the cells in your skin, to have the exact same set of DNA in it. So these are clones. There's no genetic diversity in these cells. They're identical. So that was asexual reproduction. Now we're going to look at cell division in terms of sexual reproduction. So this only occurs in our gametes, in the egg and the sperm. Mitosis happened in the body cells. This one is going to be called meiosis. It happens in the gametes, your egg and your sperm. So this is how we create eggs and sperm. If gametes contained the same number or the same amount of DNA as every other cell in your body, or the full complete set of chromosomes, when they fertilize, so when the egg and the sperm meet, it would actually have twice as much DNA in it when it creates that very first cell called the zygote. So if we're talking about an example of human cells, if the egg cell had 46 chromosomes and the sperm cell had 46 chromosomes, when they fertilize and unite and make that very first cell called a zygote, your zygote would have 92 chromosomes. It's probably not going to survive with that many. It has to have the complete set, which we know is 46 chromosomes. So we need to figure out how to get rid, or how to solve that problem. So to avoid that problem, gametes need to contain only half the full set of DNA. So in humans, a full set of DNA is 46 chromosomes. If each gamete only has half the number of DNA, each gamete, egg and sperm, will have 23 chromosomes. That means that the gametes will contain only one of the two alleles for a trait. And again, remember, alleles are different forms of a gene that encodes for a trait. So if a trait is hair color, you have a gene for hair color. And different alleles are the different colors of hair. So maybe there's an allele for brown hair, an allele for black hair. This means that each of your gametes would only contain one allele for that gene. So remember how we talked about you get one gene from your mom and you get one gene from your dad? And that's because they only have one gene to give because they have half the number of chromosomes. When it comes together, you have your pair of genes, and that's important, which we're going to talk about later on in section 3. Or an example of another trait is either black fur or white fur. So this process is called meiosis. This is only used for sexual reproduction. So meiosis involves 2 rounds of cell division. In mitosis, we start off with 1 cell, and there's 1 round of cell division, so 1 cell became 2. In meiosis, this is talking about sexual reproduction, you start off with 1 cell, it divides in 1 round of cell division into 2 new cells, and then those 2 cells are going to divide again so that you end up with 4 cells. So we call each of the cell divisions either meiosis 1 or meiosis 2. So in meiosis 1, it's essentially the same process as mitosis. So you're going to duplicate your DNA, so you have 2 times the amount of DNA, and your cell is going to divide into 2 new daughter cells. Something that's really important that happens in meiosis 1 that doesn't happen in mitosis is a process called crossover or crossing over. So essentially what happens with crossover is the chromosomes come so close together that they actually swap some genes with each other. So they're swapping some of the same genes, like a gene for hair color, with each other. So all of a sudden, we're not having identical chromosomes. We're having some genetic diversity because we're swapping genes, so they're not the same chromosomes anymore. This results in new combinations of DNA and new traits. So again, this is where our genetic diversity comes from. They're swapping some genes so that there's new possibilities on our chromosomes. They're not identical anymore. In meiosis 2, each of your 2 new cells will split again. This time though, we're not duplicating the DNA because we want to get down to having half the number of chromosomes. So here we don't duplicate the DNA, just whatever you have at the end of meiosis 1 is going to split off into your 4 new daughter cells. And these daughter cells that we're making are gametes, either eggs or sperm. So just like before, you're going to draw these diagrams, and I'm going to write some notes just beside each of the cells. So we're going to start with meiosis 1. This is going to be our first round of cell division. This very first cell is called our parent cell. And inside of our cell, we have 2 chromosomes. So for this cell, a full set of DNA is 2 chromosomes. So hopefully by the end of meiosis 2, remember we need to have half the number of chromosomes, each cell should only have one chromosome in it. Just like in mitosis, the first step of meiosis 1 is that we need to duplicate our DNA. So we'll write duplication. And now we have 4 chromosomes. I'm just going to use shorthand, and CHR stands for chromosomes. So now we have 2 red chromosomes and 2 blue chromosomes. Those chromosomes are going to line up in the middle, just like what they did in mitosis when we're talking about asexual reproduction. But one of the biggest keys here is that at this stage, there's also going to be that process of crossing over. So when they line up like this, they're lining up so close together that some of the genes are going to swap. Okay, so imagine maybe the 2 chromosomes on the left, the red and the blue, they're going to swap some genes. Okay, so then we'd have, on the right, top right, we'd have a red chromosome. Bottom right, we have a blue chromosome. They didn't swap anything. Top left, because the 2 ones on the left, we said crossed over, the red chromosome, let's say it took a little bit of the blue chromosome with it. And the blue chromosome on the bottom, because it crossed over with the red on top, now it's a blue chromosome with a little bit of red on it. Unfortunately, it's really hard for me to show that on the slide. But essentially, you'd have 4 different chromosomes. One full red, one red with a little bit of blue. One full blue, one blue with a little bit of red on it. So those would be your 4 different chromosomes in the process of crossing over. And that is one of the key steps of how we get genetic diversity within a species. That's why you might have a different hair color than your brother or sister. Okay, just like before, these little kind of posts are going to form on either side of the cell, the left and the right side of the cell. They're going to form these kind of protein bridges off to the chromosomes, and they're going to pull the chromosomes apart so that we end off with 2 chromosomes in each of our 2 new daughter cells. So we're going to say 2 daughter cells. We ran out of room. 2 daughter cells. There's 2 chromosomes in each. I'm going to use CHR as shorthand for chromosomes. And at this point, these cells are already genetically different. Let's see if I can squeeze this in here for notes. Ooh, apparently not. Sorry, I'll just tell you to write for the bottom there. So each of these new cells is genetically different. That's what I was just about to type in there or write it in there. They're genetically different than that original parent cell because of that crossing over piece. At this point, we're done meiosis 1. That's the first round of cell division. So now we're going to start meiosis 2. So we can write that on there. Meiosis 2. So now our previous two daughter cells are each starting off as a parent cell for meiosis 2. Again, these cells are genetically different than what we started off with, that very first cell, because they've swapped some genes. So we don't need to duplicate our DNA because we're trying to have half the number of DNA in each of our cells. So the very first step is that our chromosomes are going to line up. They're going to line up in the middle of the cell. Those little posts on either side of the cell are going to start to form. Those protein bridges will grab each of the chromosomes, and they're going to start to separate them. As they're pulling those chromosomes apart, the plasma membrane is going to start to pinch off. So each of those two cells, that we start there at the top, they're going to become two more cells. So if our two cells each divide, we end off with our 4 cells, and each will have half the number of chromosomes inside. So altogether, each one, essentially, if we were to put them together, would have one complete X in there, when the chromosomes, when they look like that X shape in there. All right, so this is the end of meiosis 2. These are our 4 daughter cells. Another technology fail there. 4 daughter cells. Each cell contains 1 chromosome. That very first parent cell that we had at the beginning of meiosis 1 had 2 chromosomes, and now each of our final products, our 4 daughter cells, has half the number of chromosomes. So they only have 1 chromosome each. And then super important, each cell contains a chromosome that is genetically different than that one original parent cell. None of these 4 chromosomes, 1 in each cell, will be the same as the original 2 chromosomes that we started off with. And that's thanks to that crossover piece in meiosis 1. In meiosis, don't forget, we're making sex cells. We're making gametes. So these 4 things that we just created are either going to be 4 eggs or they're going to be 4 sperm. So I know meiosis and mitosis are very confusing because some parts of them are similar, some parts are very different. So let's compare and contrast the two. Okay, so on the left we have mitosis and on the right we have meiosis. So mitosis produces body cells, every cell in your body. Meiosis only produces your sex cells, your gametes, the egg and the sperm. Mitosis occurs in all parts of the body. That makes sense because it's making body cells. Meiosis only occurs in the gonads. So eggs are made in the ovaries and sperm is made in the testes. In mitosis, DNA replicates before mitosis or before that cell division. In meiosis, DNA replicates before meiosis 1, that first round of cell division. For mitosis, we have one nuclear division. That's just referring to dividing the nucleus. So one division of the nucleus. In meiosis, we have two nuclear divisions, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Mitosis ends in two identical daughter cells. And if we're talking about humans, each of those daughter cells will have 46 chromosomes each. That's a full set of DNA for a human. In meiosis, it results in 4 daughter cells, and each daughter cell, if we're talking about humans, has 23 chromosomes. It needs to have half the number of chromosomes so that when an egg unites with a sperm, 23 plus 23, your zygote will have 46 chromosomes. So if we're not going to do this activity, but let's kind of go over some of these notes. So organisms of the same species have the same number of chromosomes. So all humans have 46 chromosomes. All strawberry plants have 96 chromosomes. Different species have different number of chromosomes. And sometimes they also pair up differently. So in humans, we have 2 of each chromosomes. So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. But in some other species, like the strawberry plant, they have 8 of each chromosome. They don't have pairs. They have 8 of each chromosome. Okay, to practice meiosis, mitosis, I want you to copy down this chart. If it's in your notes, great. If not, you'll need an extra piece of paper to copy it down. So you don't necessarily have to memorize the steps of mitosis and meiosis. A lot of what you have to be able to tell me with mitosis and meiosis is how many cells you start with, how many cells you end with, how many chromosomes are at the start or at the end of each cell division, or at different stages in reproduction. And then you also have to be able to tell me whether they're genetically identical or genetically different. So for this table, you have your organisms on the left. You have your number of chromosomes in a cell at the end of mitosis. You have your number of chromosomes in a body, also known as a somatic cell. So you have to remember if body cells are made in mitosis or meiosis. Then you have the number of chromosomes in a gamete. Gametes are eggs and sperm. You have number of chromosomes in a zygote. Remember that zygote is that very first cell after an egg and sperm fertilize. And then the last one, you have to say the number of pairs of chromosomes. So just imagine in each of these organisms, your chromosomes pair up. So your 4 organisms are cabbage, black bear, human, and a peanut. Okay, so you'll notice that for each one of the organisms, I give you one number and you have to go back in and fill out the rest. So you can pause the video here, copy down this table, fill it out, and then when you unpause, I'll have the answers for you. Okay, so you've finished your table. Let's go over the answers. Okay, so it's just on the next slide over. So let's start with cabbage. I gave you the number 18. So that's the number of chromosomes at the end of mitosis. Remember, mitosis makes identical cells to the parent cell. So 18 would be a full set of chromosomes. For the next one, number of chromosomes in a body cell. Well, mitosis makes body cells. So if we have 18 chromosomes at the end of mitosis, well, we've just made 2 new body cells. So we're also going to have 18 chromosomes in our body cells. Number of chromosomes in a gamete, eggs and sperm. Remember, those have to have half the number of chromosomes. So half of 18 is 9. Number of chromosomes in a zygote, that's when the egg and the sperm fertilize. So if an egg cell in a cabbage has 9 chromosomes, the sperm cell in a cabbage has 9 chromosomes. 9 plus 9 is 18. So your zygote has 18 chromosomes. And the number of pairs of chromosomes, well, you'd have 9 pairs of chromosomes, which makes 18 pairs total. Okay, if we talk about black bears. For black bears, I gave you the number of pairs of chromosomes. So there's 36 pairs. So you need to ask yourself, how many total chromosomes make up a complete set of DNA? So it'd be twice the number of pairs. So 36 times 2, which is 72. So that means at the end of mitosis, you have a full set of chromosomes, 72 chromosomes. In a body cell, which is made by mitosis, you have 72 chromosomes. In a gamete, which are made by meiosis, there's half the number of chromosomes. So each gamete, egg and sperm, will have 36 chromosomes. When the egg and the sperm fertilize and make your zygote, you have 72 chromosomes. With the human, I gave you that there's 23 chromosomes in a gamete. So remember, gametes have half the number of chromosomes. So when they fertilize and make your zygote, there would be 23 plus 23 chromosomes equals 46 chromosomes. We'll go back to the start. So a full set of chromosomes would be 46. So at the end of mitosis, you'd have 46 chromosomes. Mitosis makes body cells. So we have 46 chromosomes in each body cell. And if we paired up all of our 46 chromosomes, there would be 23 pairs. Okay, and then the last one, we had peanuts. So I gave you at the end of mitosis, a peanut has 40 chromosomes. That's its complete set of DNA. Number of chromosomes in a body cell, mitosis makes body cells, so that would be the same number, 40. Number of chromosomes in a gamete, so it's going to be half. So half of 40 is 20. When an egg and a sperm fertilize and make that first cell called the zygote, you have 20 plus 20 is 40 chromosomes. And if you were to pair up those 40 chromosomes, you'd have 20 pairs. So these are 2 really good summary videos. They go into mitosis and meiosis in much more detail than what we need to know for grade 9, but it's still a really good summary of what you start with, what you end with, and it goes into a lot of detail of kind of what happens in between, but it might help you just kind of get a little bit more clarity on really what's going on, especially with that crossover piece that I couldn't really show you on my slides. So on your own time, I would watch these ones just to kind of see in depth mitosis, and meiosis. Okay, so review. So you're going to fill in this charts. So again, we're going to talk about humans. So we can use 46 chromosomes for humans and pairs and that kind of stuff. You're going to pause the video, copy down this table, and then we're going to go over it. So when you unpause, we'll go over the table. Okay, so you're done copying down the table and you're done going through it. So now we're going to check your answers. So we have mitosis and meiosis. This is kind of a compare and contrast table. This is what essentially you need to know for grade 9. You don't have to know kind of the in-between steps of mitosis, meiosis. If you know this table inside and out, you'll do fine. All right, so the first one, number of chromosomes in the original parent cell. We're talking about humans. So in mitosis, number of chromosomes in an original cell, we have 46. In meiosis, we also are starting off with 46. Tech glitch. Next, number of chromosomes in one final daughter cell. So at the end of mitosis, we have identical cells, so they're going to have 46 chromosomes. At the end of meiosis, we're going to have our gametes, and they're going to have half the number of chromosomes. So each daughter cell is going to have 23 chromosomes. Number of parent cells. Those are our original cells. So in mitosis, we start off with one parent cell. In meiosis, we also start off with one parent cell. Number of daughter cells made. In mitosis, there's one round of cell division. So we start with our one parent cell and we get 2 daughter cells. In meiosis, there's 2 rounds of cell division. So we start off with our one parent cell, it divides into 2, and then those 2 cells divide into 4 daughter cells. Are daughter cells genetically identical or different? Mitosis is an asexual reproductive strategy. So it's how you make all of your body cells. So we need to make clones. So these are going to be genetically identical. In meiosis, we want to have variation. This is where variation within a species comes from. So their daughter cells are going to be genetically different than the parent cell. Number of cell divisions. So how many times does the cell divide? In mitosis, it happens once. In meiosis, it happens twice, right? Meiosis 1, meiosis 2. And then last question, which type of cell does this occur? Mitosis happens in body cells. Sorry, I have fat fingers. I hit the wrong button. I accidentally hit a button. And now my computer is going to glitch out. There we go. Sorry, so we're on the last one. For mitosis, what type of cell does this occur in? So body cells for mitosis. Meiosis are sex cells. Sex cells, which are also called your gametes. Body cells are also called your somatic cells. So there was all your answers right there. All right, this is the last thing we're going to talk about for the end of this lesson. So it's just the human life cycle. So how does it go from gametes to adult back down to gametes? So we're going to start down here. Down at the bottom left with our egg and our sperm. Okay, so the egg has 23 chromosomes. The sperm has 23 chromosomes. When we move up here, the sperm and the egg are going to fertilize. When they fertilize, when they come together, the end result is that we have 46 chromosomes. When they fertilize, they make something called the zygotes. The zygote is that very first cell that's formed. It's one single cell, and it's made out of 46 chromosomes. Next, what happens is it says growth and development. What's happening there, that's the step that we talked about in section 2 called cleavage. Cleavage, that's just cell division. So at this point, your zygote undergoes mitosis, that asexual reproduction. So you're just making a bunch of copies of the same cell. Okay, when you have a bunch of cells, once it's divided a whole bunch, then it's called the embryo, down at the bottom right there. And the embryo has 46 chromosomes. At that point, your embryo will still grow and develop, and it becomes an adult. So something that's kind of interesting is that females, like genetically or biologically females, they're born with all the eggs that they'll have for the rest of their life. So females undergo meiosis when they're actually still in the womb. Males, on the other hand, are going to develop sperm through meiosis for the rest of their lives. Okay, once you're an adult, then through sexual reproduction, you start the cycle over again. So you have the egg and the sperm that fertilize, create the zygote, undergoes cleavage, becomes an embryo, grows and develops into an adult. Okay, that's it for today's lesson. I would highly recommend going back and watching those 2 summary videos on meiosis and mitosis, and let me know if you have any questions.